I'm delighted to have here a wonderful client of mine, Jonathan Meadows, who is the founder and man behind Regulation Resolution, a law firm that specializes in defending and protecting healthcare professionals. And we've been enjoying working together now. I think it's just over 6 months. And we were looking at what he's achieved and how he's achieved it, and thought that we would record this to share with other law firm owners and partners as to what's possible when you take the right actions in the right order, learn the right skills. And yeah, John, it's great to have you here.
Good afternoon. How are we doing?
So take us from the beginning. Before you even knew about me,
Mm.
law firm owner, what were you dealing with on a day to day?
So I think when often when you start, you have a kind of vision in play. And actually, what happens very, very quickly is that you become consumed by the doing, being on the tools, doing the billables. And it's tricky, very much, it's really tricky to get the headspace to even know then what does the next 6 months look like? What does the next 12 months look like? What does the next 5 years look like? And where do we want to go with this? And I think you can easily lose sight of um, the reason you started and the vision that you have, because you get very quickly drawn back into the same thing you were doing before you started your own firm, essentially, which is doing the doing. So what I was really looking forward for was someone to drag me out of that, somebody to be accountable to, somebody else that could really take a bird's eye view on things and help me build that into a clear strategy that could be worked on, week out, to pull me out of doing all of the billable work and into a place where it felt more like tweaking, having a bird's eye view, and pulling the right levers at the right time to make sure that the firm was going in the right direction.
Yeah,
And so,
nice.
yeah, I'm a big believer in mentors. I've always believed in that, and I think it's important to find someone that you can do that with. And I think people one would be naive to think that you can do all of this on your own, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. And so you were doing a lot of billable work, and I remember that you were finishing sort of in the evening, having dinner, and then going back to doing billable work, and you're also working on weekends as well.
Yeah.
And
Working a lot of time, and I think the reason I moved into doing things on my own was essentially twofold. One, because there is a financial freedom with things if it goes well, but attached to that is also about time. I think that's the biggest thing. The most important thing is how one chooses to spend their time. And for me, I've got a young family, so part of the reason I did this was to be able to spend more time with my young family. And so at the time I came to you, I was working really quite long hours. I was, able to do a bit of bedtime routine, but then going straight back to work and then working until, I can remember some evenings working till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning,
wow.
getting up at 6, doing it all again, no longer running, no longer going to the gym, not really getting out at weekends, spending all of the time, any spare time I had away from the family and children, um, doing work. And I think also the other thing is that the thing that people don't talk about is that often when you're with your family, it's very difficult to be present because you are thinking about all of the other stuff that you've got to do.
Mm.
And so, part of the work you and I have done is really to move, away from doing that all the time, recognizing the benefit of space, whether it's, going for a half an hour jog, going to the gym, those things that one needs to build in, as well as, all the other important things in your life, helps actually benefit the business rather than the opposite. You think the opposite is to do more hours, more billing, whatever it is. And it's about creating the right space to be able to achieve what you want to achieve and do that in a profitable way. And I think that's probably what we've talked about and been through probably the most in our sessions.
Yeah, nice. So initially, how did you find out about me? Like what drew you to have a conversation with me?
I did a lot of research on finding someone that I wanted to work with in terms of pulling me out of this situation that I was in, and I wasn't quite sure what that looked like. So I did some research on, do I need someone who's going to help me structure the business properly in a way that I can profit or do whatever. What I decided really for me was it was probably a combination of two things. And it was, yes, it's important to work out how to structure, how to put in things at the right time, how to work out who your people are going to be in the firm, how to attract new people, how to get new business. But the other thing is like more of a personal thing, and recognizing that when you do work with somebody in this area, it isn't just about what the business is going to achieve. There's some personal elements that are connected to this that are really
Mm.
very important, and they go hand in hand,
Yeah.
essentially. So I looked at that, and the thing that really drew me in was I saw a lot of people in your sort of testimonial pages that had a very similar story to me, and I could see where they were, which is where I was at the time, and I could see where they ended up, and I thought to myself, okay, that's where I want to be. Is that achievable? We had the conversation, we got on pretty well, and yeah, went from there.
Yeah, great. Great. And then we started working together. What were some of the first things that you started to notice work that made a difference?
I think I think there's a couple of things is that, in the same way that I say to my children when they're looking at a task, and I say to them, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It is very much that thing. You've got this whopping great goal over here. You don't know how you're going to get there. And of course, it's not a linear straight line journey. It is zigzag. But the important thing is that, when you break down goals into 1 year goal, 3 month goal, weekly goals, you start to, and you focus your time and you build that into your calendar. I've got to do 2 hours on this, build it in because it's important. It is tough because you're doing it on top of what you're doing, but the thing is, you are all of a sudden, without really thinking about it, you're in a place that you didn't realize you were going to get to. And I think it's a bit like, just consistently going to the gym. All of a sudden you look in the mirror and you've built some arm muscles. It's the same thing. It's consistency, and
Yeah.
someone holding you to account and working out what that looks like. And I think
So
that strategy really works.
yeah, so what you're talking about is us having got clear on your future focus plan of what your life's going to look like 3 years from today, and then
Yeah.
breaking it down. Well, okay, so as wild as that might seem, for that to exist in 3 years, what needs to exist a year before then, 2 years from today? And we laid that out. Then the year before then, which is a year from today, and then what's the next 90-day milestones that need to exist, and then what are this week's very most important actions? And
Yeah.
it's often about saying no to everything else, isn't it? And actually working out, well, what is actually important and the most important thing, and making sure that gets done each week, right?
Yeah. And that kind of clarity means that you're not taking a scattergun approach to things, because it's very easy to chase the next bit of business coming in. It's very easy to look at, whatever's there, and having clarity on the direction of things does mean you do say no to some things. That is how it goes, because you've got a very clear idea of where you want to be. And I think that is something that I didn't have until we started working together. And now I think, our future focus plan, or whatever you refer it to as, the document that you and I work on consistently and constantly,
Yeah.
is always open. It lives on my screen
Yeah.
next to all the other work I'm doing. And because it just reminds me that I've got to, these are the things I've got to do. You've got to be
Yeah.
consistent with it in this way. It's really very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And then I remember one of the things that we started to become aware of that you needed to be doing more of was business development.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you've, through including business development as a key action, as an important action each week, you've done quite well, haven't you?
Really, really on a personal level, I've made so many friends and connections in the space that I'm working in. And it's very, I've always really hated BD, if I'm being entirely honest. Like, lots of conversations over coffees or whatever else. But I've actually come to love it. I really enjoy meeting new people, hearing about their things. And often business is a kind of byproduct of those conversations that you're having. It's the thing that you talk about or drop in when you pick up the check, and relationships build from there. It's been absolutely fantastic to work out and spend time doing those things. As a result, we've made some really excellent connections. The work has been coming in. It's been consistent. We've gone from revenue. Our revenue is roughly increased by about just over 200%, I think. In comparison to to, comparing
Yeah,
the
nice.
last 6 months to the next 6 months. Yeah.
And of course, the way you've come up with that calculation is you've looked at the recent 6 months and then looked at the same 6 months of last year. And the difference between those same 6 months of last year and the 6 months of this year is over 200% increase in revenue, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's been quite remarkable actually in such you know a short space of time to be able to achieve that, but to achieve it in a way that isn't meaning that I'm burning out or sacrificing my health over it. And I think that's the
Okay.
key thing for me. It's we've done things really quickly. We've got off the ground. I feel like we as a firm are now in the space. People start to notice us and say, you are here. I have gone from a place where I was barely exercising at all. I now probably do an hour plus a day, and I'm there to pick up my children at 5 o'clock, and I'm not working weekends. That's the key thing. Whilst achieving this revenue increase,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
has been quite amazing, really. Yeah, I have to say.
That's so rewarding. It's very rewarding for me to have been part of this journey with you. And that, I'm wondering, surely you knew that you had to do business development. Why wasn't that happening like before we worked together?
Yeah,
What's
I
the
mean,
key thing that you've got from me that you couldn't seem to get round to on your own?
I guess it's. I think one of the kind of one of the key things is that how so we market in a certain way, and clients do come to us, which is really helpful. We have some referrals coming in. I think most businesses have to have multiple income streams coming in because you can never really rely on one stream over another, and that's why BD is so important in terms of what we do. I think the reason I wasn't really getting to it was probably a kind of self-prescribed procrastination over it because I didn't really enjoy it. It's always at the bottom of your list, but also
Mm,
it's just the sheer volume of work when you do. You have to bring in the money to begin with because you've got to build the business. You then start to look at this. But I think you get so entrenched and ingrained in what you're doing on the tools that doesn't become a priority,
mm,
and you can't. And instead, you're on this treadmill all of the time, just doing the work, doing the work, doing the work, and not really looking at how to grow the business and do the work on the business rather than being stuck in the business. And I think that's where BD is so important and where it comes into. And that's one of the things that we've worked on. Uh,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. One of the things I see is that when we're in our own business, we generally get triggered into doing what's urgent, and we just keep spinning around doing what's urgent, what's urgent. And what we don't get around doing is doing what's important. And what is important are those key specific actions that has us build a better, more rewarding law firm for the future. And
yeah,
so, but the work we've done is to just stop time whenever we dial in and work out what is the very most effective thing that if you carried it out this week would change everything. And once we then distinguished that, then you really committed and took these things on. And the fact is not everybody gets such great results from working with me. That's the fact. I can proudly say everybody gets a great ROI. However, 200% revenue in just over 6 months is quite something. And I think that's down to you being disciplined to actually take those actions that matter, to take the time to go and find somebody like me, to invest in yourself like this, and then to actually take on the program, commit to it, and play full out. That I think that's extraordinary.
well, you don't. I think with these things, you kind of, if you are investing, you have to commit to what you're doing because otherwise, there's no point in investing, right?
Mm,
It is an investment, and I think, yeah, I mean, as I say, nothing is a linear journey. It's a bit zigzaggy, and we have to adapt and change quite a lot. But it's really helpful having those conversations every week, dialing in every week, and sitting down. Okay, what have we got to change this week to get us back on track? Is there a slightly different direction we're going to take? And I think, yeah, I mean, so helpful. I think people that go into this kind of arrangement need to do it with a level of commitment, even if you're not aware of what you need. It has to be whatever's on the table. I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to make sure I do this every week because that's the material difference. That's the key
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, but of course, as you're saying, when you're on your own, you're so lost in the doing what's urgent, you don't even get around to even becoming aware what's important, let alone scheduling in and doing it.
Yeah, it you don't, and yeah, it takes someone else to drag you out of that. Sometimes it really does.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I think life is busy. There's no doubt that life is busy, but it is busy in a way that is incredibly enjoyable. And I spoke to someone the other day, and they said, "How you doing?" I said, "Yeah, I've got young kids. I'm tired. But I get out every day. I work hard every day. I've turned my life around in a slightly different way that is super busy, but I don't think I've ever been happier."
yeah, brilliant, brilliant. So there you go, over 200% revenue increase. You've got your evenings back, your weekends back. You've got time to pick up your children. You're exercising between an hour and a half a day, happier than you've ever been. What advice would you give to a law firm owner or partner who's possibly interested about speaking to me and thinks, oh, yeah, this wouldn't work for me?
I think that I can't. I think it's not something that is. It's not formulaic. It's not a. It's structured to the individual. It's very personal as to what. It's about you as an individual looking at what you want to achieve over the next 5 years. If what you want to achieve over the next 5 years is to bury your head, keep working as hard as you can, not really see the light of day, and have a heart attack at 60, that's fine. Don't invest. But it is subjective and personal, and it's about somebody else holding up a mirror and saying, "This is where you are. This is where you want to be. This is how we're going to get there." And that is the investment. That's the really important thing. And so, yeah, I would say if you're going to do it, invest and commit. There will be some slippage. There always is, but commit to what you're doing.
Yeah. And so but what is your advice to anybody who's thinking about speaking to me and finding out more?
Um, what is my advice to anyone who wants to speak to you? I mean, just have the conversation, see how it fits, see what the future could look like for you, and if it's something that you're ready and willing to invest in, go at it pretty hard, and you will see great results.